Welcome again. This is another episode of Media Mentality where I review, react, and recommend something that I find interesting, all consuming of pop culture. I'm just going to give a super quick spoiler warning to everything I'm going to say. I'm not going to get into super specifics of the films that I want to talk about, but I realize, in reviewing, I have to give some things away, but most of it's going to be vague, but you can still put things together. So if you want to go in completely unaware of what it is that I'm talking about right now, before you check out this video, forewarned now. But again, nothing super specific, but you definitely probably can piece a lot of it together. At first, this was going to be a simple either double review, or I was going to just review two separate movies and two separate videos. But I think every now and then, just the way the community of film goers and film lovers and just people who like to watch movies collide and react and respond to discourse one another online and even, in more professional settings, just every now and then creates an immediate response that you can see it happen in real time and the conclusion can become pretty imminent. And so mostly this is a perfect time to, while both simultaneously review films The Northman and The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, I think it's more important to talk about what these two films being released right now seems to mean for a lot of people and my own shitty 2 cents, because at the end of the day, no one's opinions matter as much as your own. But I want to make videos like this one specifically, but hopefully most of my half-ass think piece videos is just to think how we're getting there, where we're going, and if that mindset is the correct course going forward. And you can't take social media to its immediate full front. People just say random shit to get a rise out of people, or they're making half-ass jokes and then it turns into viral quotes that are seen by thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. And you can't take it seriously, or you can try not to, but it's a mindset that promotes and can infect and encourage other worse mindsets, or convince people that they're correct in being shittier than the person who just said that random throwaway crap take. But so, most importantly is The Northman. Robert Eggers is, for a lot of people, just on a roll in his filmmaking. And I agree, as a filmmaker, Robert Eggers is showing himself very well. He's extremely promising. He kind of delivers completely for what a lot of people want. But then I think there's two other types of film lovers who don't like him. And, there's the extreme go see a movie, don't overthink about it crowd. And they'll do that with anything. It doesn't matter. And that's why certain movies are just completely trashed, and other movies are like, this is what, film is and stuff. And it's the Scorsese argument, which is what I will call it. But this is not a knock on what Scorsese said or a defense of what he said. I've been thinking about making a more analytical video on what he means and how we can approach it, but that's not this video. This video is the response to the overwhelming praise from certain people of The Northman who don't seem to understand why it's not getting a lot of traction. I thought The Northman was amazingly well made. I have really no notes or nitpicky ideas over direction, editing, color palette, just overall how it looked, how it transpired as a film being made. Robert Eggers is probably to the level of someone like Fincher, who I have a high regard for. I think maybe he's even up there with more contemporaries like Alex Garland, or maybe even Denis Villeneuve. But that's really where my praise has to come to a screeching halt. And I guess this is the spoiler-ish part, if you want to call it that. 3, 2, 1, It's just a Hamlet Viking reskin. And that's probably really cruel sounding and dismissive, because, it's 2 hours and it goes through a lot of the same beats. No, it's not point for point Hamlet, but it's all the parts. Even, the very end is Hamlet. Spoilers, I guess. But you can really see it coming. And if you've even seen one trailer where it's a revenge, where he has to kill his uncle and save his mother, you can guess, probably everyone, including himself, is probably going to die. But the problem with adapting this Shakespearean storytelling mindset is you got two options really. You let that Shakespeareanism do all the heavy lifting and you don't have to really overdo the character work, or you overdo the character work and you make more unique, interesting characters to carry this new version. And this movie does neither. The characters are not interesting or likable or fundamentally sound to like care for, I don't think. I know Alex Skarsgård's a good actor, and I know Anna Taylor-Joy's a pretty good actor. And I know Nicole Kidman and William Dafoe are great fucking actors, and they have great acting scenes, but they don't have scenes where their characters mean anything or create any kind of sense that matters later on much longer. When something important is brought in to the film, it's kind of immediately, killed off or squashed or not considered as significant about 2 or 3 scenes later. It constantly resets its point. It feels like things are about to build and build and build. Then they go back down and we're building and building and building again. Then we go back down. We're building and building and building again. It doesn't get till the actual climax, which I'll get to in a second, because that, to me, is, I'm going to say a lot of blasphemous things about that ending. It looks cool. It's done well, but that's not enough. And that is the same statement that a lot of film lovers and cinephiles and online film nerds say about superhero movies. And in a huge sense, you can see almost immediately this is Edgar's attempt, for some weird, silly reason, at doing an epic blockbuster X story, except he completely missed the characterization and personality of one. It is still his minimalist, secretive, nitty-gritty, stripped down and dry, aggressive styling, but trying to do big and sweeping, that doesn't work. You have to give us something to give a shit about. Why are we going to give a shit about him wanting to kill his uncle when you show him as this crazy murderous badass with this other Viking horde that does the exact same thing that happened to him as a child? And that is his trigger moment. That is Skarsgård's character's, whose name is Amleth, by the way. Very similar to Hamlet, you know what I mean? But when he realizes in that moment that he's just doing the same thing that his uncle did to him, more or less, he realizes, sort of, after also drunken stupor and being, convinced by Bjork that he's got to go do it, because it's the Bjork scene is what I call it, where it's just her decked out to the nines, doing her best hardcore community theater rendition of crazy Norn seeing the future oracle lady kind of thing. That's what it is. Again, it's just Greek tragedy and Shakespeare, but with Vikings. And it's not that we've seen it too many times. It's just, besides the really cool hallucinogenic and illusionary scenes that we get kind of peppered throughout, I don't think they're really attached to anything. They don't convey much more. They don't give they give a sense of the Viking style, of like actual Viking culture maybe, or society, or what it was probably like to feel like a Viking. But it has nothing to do with this revenge story. It really doesn't. It doesn't give that feeling too much. And a lot of it falls flat. It's not just the characters. I think the plot does nothing special. The dialogue is simplistic, sometimes really good, sometimes really like goofy, but not even in a fun or funny way. Just kind of like, yeah, I get what you're doing. That's weird. It's kind of dumb. We're moving on. Doesn't even matter. There were so many certain high points where like the adrenaline really kicked in. And I don't mean like full bonkers, balls to the wall, sweeping epic stuff. That wasn't necessary. But there was this one key point more than anything where Skarsgård's character kills 2 guys that are part of the encampment of his uncle when he's finally there. And he sets them up in this way where it's really creepy and fucked up. And this felt like he was going to just start tormenting his uncle for the next like 45 minutes, because this was still like barely halfway through the movie. But then we kind of start over again. And then we start over again after that, after Nicole Kidman has her scenes and the predictability of what the deal is with him and his mother happens. Again, because it's still fucking Hamlet at the end of the day. And you genuinely only need one character to care about. I started like, soul searching or something, trying to figure out if it was just this type of movie I'm not into. When was the last movie similar to this I really, really loved? And the answer is The Revenant. The Revenant. And I, of course, loved Leo, but I also think Tom Hardy did a great job being the villain in that as well. It's, a revenge period drama is the closest I can put to it. There are other similar films in the last couple of years that I've seen that kind of mirror this as well. The Last Duel immediately comes to mind, and how Ridley Scott was super upset again that no one watched this movie and they only wanted to watch superhero films. But that one that I did end up seeing like in February when I was like sick and whatever. That film I actually do kind of regret not paying attention to. It was very well made, and the characters mattered. I felt their feelings. I felt like these were actual created people dealing with this hardship and this really fucked up, intense situation throughout the film. They all felt real. Even the super out of place Ben Affleck, sheriff or king or something. He wasn't a king. He was like some royal bishop advisor ass fuck, and he's kind of bad acting and he's kind of horrible, but it didn't take away from how much everyone else was giving 110% to make up for his bullshit. And it kind of worked in that regard because he was a like semi bad guy that was fucking things up and corrupting things, so that worked for that aspect. Here we get nothing from the uncle. He's not anything. He doesn't really have any moments to himself. We don't really get anything from him to make him more of a bastard, or likable, less likable, or hateful, or wanting to hate him, especially with kind of the reveal that Skarsgård's dad was shit. Kind of, he was sort of lame, and a lot of people were actually happy that his brother killed him. That's a weird, like, is that the twist? That's not good, because now really who are we rooting for? We're rooting because this guy lost his father to his uncle, but then it turned out his father kind of deserved it according to everyone else but the son, so now he's just kind of crazy. But that derangement never really comes in. That's another thing. We have these illusionary hallucinogenic concepts and these images of Valhalla and Norsedom and mythology really infecting him in certain ways, but most of it was before he found out the secret that his dad was kind of shit and kind of deserved it a little bit. And that's not even like super confirmed, but now he's dealing with that little voice in his head was like, my father was a bad person except to me, but except he doesn't really. That's never brought up again either. There are certain things like that throughout the film where it sounds like it's an important shift change in a character moment, but the character is so one note that they just keep driving through the plot, and there's no regret or contemplation or regard of change or shift of any kind. They just kind of keep cutting through the plot. And so yeah, everyone's pretty lame, and I can't handle watching a super well made, super well crafted story with garbage characters who have no conception of self. It's not even about character growth or character development. We got to start at character. One thing I'll say about The Lighthouse, and I wasn't a big Lighthouse fan, so it kind of comes to maybe I just don't like Robert Edgers, is I liked William Dafoe and Robert Pattinson, but they were just two guys who got the whole time to themselves, and the whole point was their descent into madness. If the descent into madness or hatred or all-consuming revenge was supposed to be part of Skarsgård's Hamlet, it's not there in this. It's just Shakespearean on autopilot. He just cruises through his Shakespeareanness more than anybody else. Other people kind of, I don't know, maybe try. I don't even know why Taylor-Joy's in this, really. She doesn't get any moments to herself either. She gets one, but she just sounds like a crazy, like, shaman girl for a hot second. She really just seems to be there as a sex piece as a romantic interest because you have to have one. And I don't want to throw any blame or anything, but this is one of those very like just white dude fantasy kind of feels at this point, where this weak, pathetic little boy watches his father die, goes away, becomes a mad, intense, crazy killer dude who is like basically a one man army, and he really shows, and he's like near invincible. And I guess the driving force of his need for revenge, which he says, his hatred for it, that's all he's ever been. And then he gets this hot young girl. Then he goes and has his final battle. And here's hardcore spoilers. The final battle, which immediately got memed into being the Battle of Mustafar from Star Wars Episode 3 with Obi-Wan and Anakin, because they're just surrounded by a lava pit of fire and they're sword dueling until one gets their head cut off and one gets stabbed. Again, Hamlet style. And that's it. That's all she wrote. But I have this thing. So now getting into filmmaking as a society, or the film society, film community, the online film community, whatever it's called. And I'm not really a part of it, but I still keep my ear to the ground. I see how people call this like an original movie, and it's a creative original movie, and you need to go support creativity and originality and not just support $1 million IP of pre-established stuff and name notoriety shit. That is true, but just because the title didn't say based on Hamlet at any point in the credits doesn't mean that you should just kind of brag or tout that this is an original story, because it's not. It's so derivative. Now, it's a greatly made film, and if all you care about is greatly made films, then go see it. Go see this greatly made film that has nothing else to offer but how fucking well and amazingly crafted it was. But for me, I need something that holds water across the board. I need something that's like solid sixes and up in every aspect, not a whole bunch of nines on one side and a whole bunch of threes on the other or something, which is kind of what I feel like, which makes it overall, if I have to give it a rating, it's like a 6.5, and that's me saying that just so I don't get yelled at. But I'm going to get yelled at anyways. I'm going to be told I don't know how filmmaking works or something. But the filmmaking's not the problem. That's the other thing. If you want to come at me about the characters or the story, sure. Themes even, I guess, but I think the themes are pretty obvious. The spirituality of what is doing wrong or right, and it's all about, the Viking concept of getting to Valhalla if you deserve it kind of stuff. And those things, for sure, all exist there, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they matter at all, really, in the grand scheme of such poorly conveyed characters and dull, overly, like genuinely predictable, not because it's telegraphed, but because you've already been here before so many times kind of plot. There's two types of predictability that people don't talk about, and that is predictable because the film told you through cinematic storytelling that this is the most logical conclusion, and then because you've already seen this movie before with a different skin. That's two types of predictable. And to me, wholeheartedly, without a doubt, Northman falls under the second, and it sucks. I'm disappointed by that. I'm not happy that it's a bad story. I'm not happy that the characters are boring and dull and uninteresting, but we need to like be real with ourselves. And I've seen people talk about, how what a crime it is that Morbius has made more money than this film. It is a crime because that movie is horrendously made and is super unlikable, and the characters are bad, and it doesn't go anywhere, and they straight up cut out probably like 30 minutes of the film because there's no way this wasn't at least a 2-hour movie. They cut the runtime down to an hour and 44 minutes, and that is egregiously small for any kind of big end storytelling that they want to try to do. And I understand if people don't like the MCU because the characters are annoying or they just don't like superhero stuff. I genuinely understand the point of not liking superhero stuff, or if you have this weird idea that superheroes need to just be violent and brutal and not like quippy or colorful or sarcastic, or there's too many quippy, colorful, sarcastic heroes. I totally get it, and that's fine. But the issue here is that Morbius is awful. Morbius shouldn't make money. But the Northman's not really the right horse to back and bet on either. You know it is, though. So I do want to say that even though The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is hilarious and a great movie, also go see Everything Everywhere All at Once if you haven't already. I'll probably push that forever because I think that's the best actual original film this year, without a doubt. And at the end of this, I'm going to list the next like 3 months original films that are coming out that you should really see. So if that's super important to you, don't forget that. I'll put a timestamp on where that list is if you just want to skip my earlier rant and now this one, because this might be going a little long at this point. And there's not much I can actually say about The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. It's super meta. It's Nick Cage playing Nick Cage, but it then devolves into talking about making the events of this movie into a movie. That's the most I really want to spoil that. Pedro Pascal really earns himself. He's great. I want to see him in so many more things. There's not enough Pedro Pascal out there. There's genuinely not. Nick Cage does a great job making fun of himself, and every joke or reported rumor or Hollywood celebrity idea or myth about Nick Cage that has existed in the last like 40 years exists in this movie, more or less. It's touched on, it's mentioned, those things are there. Even some more like really deep cut Nick Cage films are referenced. But beyond that, it's a great meta narrative about celebrity and how rich people look at themselves, and it's super fun that way. It's a little bit of a stoner comedy, but it's mostly a surreal meta narrative, and I would love more of those. I would adore if ever, at least once a year, there was a movie of a celebrity making fun of themselves this way. There's so many things you can do with this, and it would create a whole new type of comedy out there. It's just a meta black comedy about, how foolish and stupid celebrities are, and how, goofy it is, some of the things we believe about them. But also, it's still a fictitious version of Nick Cage. If you got into his personal life, the personal life of Nick Cage in this is probably the most like nicest way you can make him look. And that's only because he has a very rocky relationship with his children, way more than what this film touches on. But I love the jokey, surreal narrative of this film. So it is, I think, because the ending is so strange, it leans into absurdity because of the things it doesn't tell you. There's suddenly a question of how much of that film was supposed to be actually happening, and how much of that film was maybe completely made up from the mind of one of the characters. That kind of thing. Clearly all films are made up. I don't have to tell you that. But just in case, and it gets so many layers of meta, I may not be conveying it correctly. But there are a couple moments where it almost feels like maybe it's all in Nick's head, and it's like, uh-oh. And some people don't like those kind of movies. But maybe for comedy, it's okay. For way more serious movies with a lot of stakes and consequences, that narrative could probably, upset a lot of people. But for me, I enjoyed it here. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Again, if ratings matter. Definitely go see this and Everything Everywhere All at Once, back to back, because you'll really get what you want out of it. But back to the Northman thing for, a hot second. I just think people obsessed with original film, and people who call themselves cinephiles, and those who would like willingly identify openly of being called film Twitter or film Reddit or whatever, on the online film community, should just really think about like how many horses you back on the year. You want to go see every movie, that's fine. I see like every movie the best I can. Half the time I won't talk about a movie because I think it was bad or uninteresting, and I don't want to, rain on anyone's parade. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade who likes the Northman. I really don't. But I think it's sad that sacrificing character and plot is what hardcore film enthusiasts think the MCU is doing. Because I do genuinely think Robert Eggers comes off as this niche art house guy who likes really eclectic films, really like indie art house, obscure films. And this was his idea of, I'm going to make a big blockbuster. I'm going to make my closest thing that I can stomach that would be considered something along an MCU film. And that's just dumb. Like if that's even remotely the case, or he really did want to do it this way, I have no doubt he wanted to do a Viking movie, but there's a movie called Valhalla Rising I'd recommend over this any day. And it, I think, just covers a lot more better, in my opinion. Stars Mads Mikkelsen, and it is from Nicholas Winding Refn, so give that a shot if you haven't seen it. Guy who did Drive and Only God Forgives and Neon Demon. But that had mystery to it. There's no mystery to this, which is weird because that's what Witch did, that's what Lighthouse did, but he took out mystery because I guess he thinks a sweeping epic blockbuster that's $90 million to make can't have mystery, or I don't know. And there are so many directors who managed to do huge original works that made millions and millions and millions of dollars, past hundreds of millions, who still had good characters. Nolan's gotten progressively worse, but Inception works because all those actors in that film were allowed to be characters, interesting characters, characters who felt like they had something beyond their presence and motivation on screen. The characters in Northman do not do that to me. And I think of Scorsese. Think of Scorsese in this because people invoke his fucking name like a plague of wrath, when it comes to this. Can't even tell you how many times I've seen someone go, maybe Scorsese was right, just because Northman has made less than $20 million and Morbius has made all this fucking money or whatever. It's only made like 200 million. It's a crapshoot too, guys. But I get your point. But Scorsese's not right the way you think he is by invoking his name this way, because every single film he has ever made has had characters, has had interesting people in it, has had people you clearly can tell has had lives before and after the events of the movie that they're in. Northman doesn't do that. Granted, everyone except a very small amount of characters are dead, so of course there's nothing beyond that. The mother he says he's gonna save is a prop. The uncle he says he's gonna kill is mostly a prop. The uncle's son, who you'd think could have a moment since he probably represents everything that Skarsgård's character felt in his childhood. Prop. They're all these humans are just props. Skarsgård's not a prop, but he really feels wooden. He really feels stiff. And I think about how his claim to fame when he first started, his breakthrough role was Eric the vampire in True Blood, where he was this emotionless, stoic Viking era vampire. So he's done it before, so at least he knows the feeling he's going for, I guess. But I feel like cinematic language and actual characteristic and personality filled storytelling need to marry each other at all times for a good film. And Marvel does do that one out of every like 3-4 movies. And it's one of those things where it is quantity over quality, but it's enough that there's plenty of quality in there. And Robert Eggers is too. He's 2 for 3, I think, as far as getting his point across, even though I wasn't big on The Lighthouse because I don't think he conveyed his ending very well. But that's neither here nor there. And I don't hate anything about what Eggers is doing. It simplistically saying it's not for me, but there's more to it than that. And it just feels like he is trying to push a form of filmmaking he's actually probably uncomfortable with or thinks he knows how to do, but doesn't. Apparently, in a recent interview while doing the rounds for The Northman, he said that about, I don't know, it was like half of what was put on screen for Witch was not how he envisioned it. So he still believes he's learning, and he's trying to get there. And so, 3 films in, I still think he's learning. He knows how to do filmmaking. He's got to work on character shit. He's got to work on plot. He's got to work on conveying more than one emotion at a time per scene that he's directing. That's another issue. But yeah, those are just a bunch of thoughts, and at this point I'm going to just mention a couple of original films that are coming out, that have no IP. Some are based on books because we shouldn't like let that go. And it's not like, Mockingjay shit. It's not young adult novels stuff. It's more niche books that probably be totally great as films. And, we're going to see if that's true or not. David Cronenberg is coming back with Crimes of the Future. It looks like old school body horror, but with, really good modern filmmaking sensibilities with Kirsten Stewart and Viggo Mortensen. And I'm actually really curious. I'm not a big horror fan, but I think someone like John Carpenter and David Cronenberg have way more to offer in that craft, clearly, for, lots of different reasons. Scott Dickerson, who did the first Doctor Strange movie and then had to leave Multiverse of Madness because they were telling him too many things that he didn't want to do, is finally coming back to his, horror film roots. It's a movie called The Black Phone, starring Ethan Hawke. I'm mostly just going to promote it just because I am interested to some degree, but also, I'm familiar with Scott Dickerson and I like Ethan Hawke. But horror films don't need any promotion. It'll make the money it's supposed to make because it has a devoted fan base of people who will see every single film with the word horror attached to it. Next, we have Where the Crawdads Sing, which is a murder mystery based off a novel. The trailer looked really, really good, so I'm very interested in it. It has like a David Fincher-esque Gone Girl or Girl with the Dragon Tattoo feeling, so that's what I'm hoping for at the very least. Directed by Olivia Newman, who I don't know at all, but she's done mostly a lot of television like Chicago Fire and Chicago PD. She did a film called First Match, I don't know anything about, but just a quick glimpse, it looked interesting. And of course, probably the most anticipated original film this year is Nope, Jordan Peele, starring Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya. And I'm excited because it looks wackier while still being traumatizing. And I love what I get out of Jordan Peele is he's written comedies. Get Out and Us are comedies without the humor, without like you change the tone, but it's still written as a comedy. And so that makes it scary and unsettling. It's that thing where you make a joke and no one laughs and just the tension in the room turns suffocating and you're like, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. That I think is what his writing style is and why he's so compelling and so interesting. Especially if you've seen the trailer for Nope. I mean, it's called Nope. It's a horror movie called Nope. That's funny, but it's going to be terrifying. And then the Rancher Valley, where they train the horses, is full of wacky, waveable, and floated tube men. So like, what the hell? This is a comedy not treated as a comedy, and that's why it's going to be fucking scary and cool and gripping, and I'm excited for it for sure. And last, there is Bullet Train, which is what I'm very excited for. It's directed by David Leitch, so it's just John Wick on a train, and it's starring Brad Pitt. And it's based off a Japanese novel, but it's still clearly a unique film, I don't think we should roll our eyes on films based on books. I think you'd get rid of so many like 90s classic films that way. So hopefully, when someone says original movies, they're just talking about, I guess, stuff based on comics, whatever. That's really what they mean. Having source material doesn't change it for certain stuff. But that's diving into something for another day. But I'm excited for John Wick on a Train and Nope. Definitely. So that's it for this one. I'd love to hear your opinions. Hopefully they're not all just telling me how I don't know what I'm talking about. Because my point is just, I guess we should try harder. I think Eggers should stick to what he's good at and not worry about trying to make a blockbuster. And it'll just hit, it's kind of what happened with Parasite, kind of what happened with and Midsummer, basically. So he's gonna get there, and I'm not worried about him, and I don't think he's doing anything wrong. I just think it's a little obvious that this was done in a way that was supposed to please more people, but missing the point on what it was for those kind of people to be pleased. Like, if this was supposed to get the action adventure crowd at all, it missed the mark, because while some of the fight scenes are very good, they're second banana to the visualization. They're even second banana to the story, and the story's not compelling. That's what I'm just repeating, banging my head against the wall at this point. So thank you. Tell me what you think, of course, and hopefully, follow me on Twitter, yell at me there, so I can at least kindly retort back. I have a Patreon if you care. It's there. I'm not expecting anybody to think I'm good enough to give money to yet, but it's there just in case. That sounded pathetic, didn't it? But yeah, like, share, subscribe, feel like it, as always. Thank you for listening, watching. See you next time.